Good morning. We're talking about serenity now, and as we think about serenity, we started thinking about the source of serenity, and we found that connection is the source of serenity. And that's kind of been, if there's one phrase or truth that you'd bring from this series, it would be this. Oftentimes we associate serenity with having what we want and not having what we don't want. So if we are not serene, if we are agitated, the natural thing we think about is, okay, I don't feel that good about life. How can I get what I want? And how can I get rid of what I don't want? And those two things have to do with correction. What do I have to correct in me? How can I make me the type of person so that I'll do the kind of things that I want to do in order that I might be serene? How can I correct me? Or, some of us don't focus so much on ourselves, we focus on others. How can I correct you? Because if you would do what I want you to do, then I'd be serene. But each one of those strategies has to do with correction. The problem with correction and seeking correction as the source of serenity is that the serenity you get from correction is really fragile. You know, it's fine as long as I can continue to do the things that I want to do to be serene, but if I slip up, there goes my serenity. Or if my serenity is based on you. And if you do what I want you to do, I'm serene, but all you have to do is not do that thing, and there goes my serenity. Serenity based on correction is very fragile. And what we've been saying, connection is the source of serenity. The Bible, when it gives a picture of serenity, it gives a picture of an infant with a mother. And that infant has two sets of needs, really. One set of needs is for problems to go away. If there's an upset stomach or if there's something scary under the bed, the upset stomach has to go. The monster under the bed has to leave. But an infant has a more basic need. And that basic need is more associated with serenity. And it is this, not just for the problem to go away, but for the mother especially to come close. And that's what every longing in the infant seeks connection with the mother. And when there is closeness, then even the things in life take on a different perspective. Connection is the source of serenity. We saw a couple things. The connection can be human. Human connection, certainly, as the source of serenity. One of the things that's difficult about a Memorial Day, it reminds us of the lives of those people that we drew serenity from. The mothers and the fathers who will go to the cemetery. Maybe some went yesterday, some will today, some will the next day or so. And the reflection is on the impact of that person's life. Being with them just made things more tolerable. If you were having a bad day was less bad when they were there. If you had a lousy day at work and you came home and connected with that person, the lousiness of the day seemed to recede. Human connection is the source of serenity, is a source of serenity, but Memorial Day reminds us why it can't be the source of serenity. People aren't eternal. They get sick and they die. That's why we have Memorial Days. And people who served as a human connection, as a source of serenity, aren't there anymore, which makes it today painful. That's why divine connection, God never dies, never gets tired, never misses anything, and that's why He's a source of connection. So the question is, how does God develop serenity? And you don't have to worry about this yourself. God is very invested in enabling you to be more serene. You know, we oftentimes ask the question, what do I need to do to become a more serene person? Maybe a better question is, what does God do to enable me to be more serene? And in the Bible, we'll see some things, and we'll visit with Jesus this morning, and we'll look at how He even learned serenity. We'll find that trials are involved. When God wants to develop serenity in a person, He allows them to experience hunger and hardships. And those strategies seem not to make a whole lot of sense. Why in the world would God expose us to trials, hungers, and hardships in order to develop serenity? And I think what we'll find, Jay alluded to, that serenity and joy is not related only to circumstances. Serenity has a depth to it, that it can continue to exist in the midst of trials. That's what makes it what it is. And again, we think of the Serenity prayer, and we looked at its original version. Give us the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. And serenity has to do with the acceptance of things that can't be changed. You can't correct yourself. You can't correct the situation. But serenity is possible. Why? Because serenity can exist in the midst of hungers and hardships. And that is the lesson that God teaches us. In hunger and hardships, God drives the roots of our faith deeper into His promises, deeper into what He says. And then there's time. It's hunger and hardships over time. When the Bible talks about trials, it speaks about something that lingers. So it's not something that you're going to get today and it's going to be gone by tomorrow. A trial, hunger, and hardship is long-term. It's a physical disability. It's a back problem that you deal with year after year after year. It's a relational thing that doesn't go away quickly. It's a situation at work that doesn't resolve itself quickly. That's what makes a trial a trial. You have to endure through it. Jesus experienced these things, hungers and hardships. Look what it says on your worship folder. There's a sheet there, and we find Jesus going into the wilderness. Let's read. As soon as Jesus was baptized, He went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and He saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on Him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With Him I am well pleased." Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, He was hungry. Let's notice, first of all, that this is prolonged exposure to frustrated desires. Frustrated desires can be mild or moderate or extreme. I have never experienced hunger to the degree that Jesus is experiencing hunger. Certainly I've fasted a few times and I went, for extended, but nothing like this. I don't know what this would feel like. I don't know what it would feel like to live in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, where there's an absence of food and water, not just on a regular basis. Jesus experiences this. And this hunger and hardship immediately followed His baptism. And when you think of what happened, He sees the Spirit of God coming down like a dove. He hears the Father saying, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." It's a very sensory experience. He sees what God is doing. He hears what God is doing. He experiences God in sight and sound. And then the Spirit, right on the heels of that, leads him immediately into a place where God could be neither seen nor heard. A wilderness. That's what the wilderness is about. It's a place where you pray to God and it doesn't seem like you're making connection. You pray to Him and it feels like there's a thick coat of insulation between you and Him, and the prayers shoot up but they don't get any higher than the roof. You tune your ear to hear something from God and it's silent. It's a wilderness. And the thing that distinguishes a wilderness is not just the absence of God, the absence of God's voice, but the presence of voices that are disturbing. Hunger. You hear your stomach growl when you're in the wilderness. A pleasant sound. Not only do you not hear God, you hear things you don't want to hear. And that's what makes the wilderness the wilderness. For Jesus then, the wilderness was associated with a profound absence of protection, provision, and praise. And the wilderness experiences follow in the heels of water experiences. I don't think that's just true for him. I bet if I sat down with you and I asked you, tell me about a time when God seemed especially close. Well, you might scroll back. This is Memorial Day. You can remember things today. God seemed really close. Maybe a camp experience, maybe an occasion where you were going through something, but you saw God at work in a very clear way. I'd call that a water experience. A water experience. It's the kind of experience that Jesus had. You see the Spirit. You hear the voice. It would be the same thing the Israelites went through, wouldn't it? Remember their water experience? They crossed the Red Sea. I mean, water experience is when you walk through the water on dry ground. And they did that. A wall of water to right and left. It's a water experience. They could see God's activity clearly. And then they could see His activity clearly when the water went in and all the floating bodies of their enemies. The Red Sea and the wilderness, water experience, and those seem to be the way they work. You know when I asked you about that water experience that maybe you can think about? I bet you if you thought, you'd discover that there was a wilderness experience on the far side of it. That something felt really close, but then it didn't last forever. See, that's the problem with water experiences. Had I gone through the Red Sea, I want to erect a condominium. Build a condo on the shore. And, you just prop your feet up, and then you're just there with friends, and you put your feet up on the veranda, and you remember that. Do you remember what it was like to walk through on that thing? And boy, I can almost see. It was huge. Do you remember? Yeah, I remember that. Gosh, it's nice to sit here, isn't it? Think about those days and what happened. The only problem was when they went through the Red Sea, immediately they were led into the wilderness. It's not far away. The Red Sea and the borders of the wilderness, it's just this close. And all of a sudden they find now they're in a place where there's no water. Why? It's a wilderness. They're not seeing the walls of water. And I bet if I asked you, you could identify that. Some of you are in the midst of one right now. God seems really far away. You're wondering what you did. I don't think you did anything. It seems that wilderness experiences follow on the heels of water experiences. Why is that? God's really invested in developing serenity. And you can't build a condominium on the borders of the Red Sea and experience serenity. You have to experience wilderness times, hungers and hardships. Israelites, Jesus, it's us as well. Trust. Our trust in God's care is tested in the wilderness. And here's the test. Do we believe God because of what He says or because of what we see? Why do we trust Him? Because of what He says or because of what we see? God wants to teach us to live by faith and to base our confidence on what He says. That's what happens in the wilderness. We have to base our confidence on what He says. Why? Because I can't see Him. I can't hear His voice. I don't see the provision. And therefore, I have to hang on. That's what happens in the wilderness. It's easy to believe God when you're hearing His voice. It's easy to believe God when you're walking through the Red Sea on foot. It's another thing to believe God when your enemies are encamped against you. It requires a different kind of trust. The kind of trust that is in spite of rather than because of. Trust that's in spite of what you see rather than because of what you see. In spite of what you can't hear rather than because of what you can't hear. It's trust when the lights are out and you can't hear anything coming from Him. That's what's developed in the wilderness, and that is at the heart of serenity. We talked about faith as a muscle. Faith is a muscle. And the wilderness is a situation that forces us to exercise the faith muscle. I think that's what the wilderness is. It's literally a place where effort needs to be expended. And if faith is a muscle, the wilderness is a place that forces us to exercise that muscle, that forces us to base our confidence on what He says rather than what He sees. We need to grab what He says in the wilderness because it's the only thing that we have. But what we find in the wilderness, when God's promises are all you have, boy, to a degree, they're all I need. Now, I'm not jumping up and down, but I can be serene. There's a serenity in the wilderness. And that's the only place that we learn it. Using trust in God to manage frustrated desires is the route to maturity. We learn to be hungry and yet not afraid. I was talking to Sheila Kittleson, and we were talking about children, the difference between infants who are not weaned and toddlers who are, that no longer need the mother to feed directly, but you can give the weaned child a bottle. And she was explaining to me, I hadn't had a lot of experience in breastfeeding or not, and so you'll understand that. She was telling me that before a child is weaned, they are naturally very hungry and somewhat agitated when you hold them close, because they're looking for the source of nutrition, and they associate that, so they're not very rested when against. But when a weaned child who is dependent not on the mother now directly, but on a bottle, then when they come close, what she tells me is that there is a restfulness that doesn't exist before the child is weaned. And that makes a lot of sense. It seems that that's what happens in the wilderness. See, it's not bad to admit your needs. In some corners of the church, admitting that you have a need, that something is not hunky-dory, is associated with, where's your faith? I think it takes faith to admit that you have a need. See, that's not the problem. It's not a problem to have needs. It's not a problem to express that, my life is not all it would be. Because all you're saying is, I've got hungers and hardships. Is that okay? Really? Is that okay spiritually? It's got to be okay. So what's the deal then? You know what God seems to develop? The ability to be hungry and yet not terrified. I think that's what serenity is. The ability to be hungry and yet not terrified. Why? Because you know His faithfulness. And then you can say, I'm hungry, but your track record indicates that I can be okay admitting this hunger, but I don't have to bite my nails because you're faithful. So it's not dismissing God's faithfulness, and it's not dismissing your hunger. You have to hold them both. You have to hold them both. Don't let go of your needs and pretend that you don't have them. Don't let go of faith in God's faithfulness and know that you can hold both of those strings at the same time. Why? I think that's at the heart of serenity. Anything else is pretending. And you can't pretend to have serenity. Look what it says. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So here's the progression here. You're going to end up mature and complete, not lacking anything. But the process that you're going to have to go through to get to this place is going to be walking through a bunch of stuff that you really don't want to walk through. I don't care what you say. Perseverance is not fun. And in this, it's long suffering. That's what it means. You're going to walk through these things. And they're not going to be fun. You're going to have to hold on to, I'm hungry, and hold on to your hope at the same time. But if you do that, what you're going to get to is a place that you're going to be mature and complete, not lacking anything. But you're going to look back on the road and you're going to say, whoa, that's a tough road. I know people who seem to radiate a sense of deep faith. And when I talk to them I usually find that kind of person has gone through a lot of difficult things. That's where they learned what they've learned. It doesn't come easy. Trials don't disappear quickly, and trust isn't built quickly. Serenity takers. Trials, time, trust. Serenity makers. What are the serenity makers? Trials, time, trust. Serenity makers. What are the serenity takers? Let's read. Because that's what Satan seeks to do when Jesus is in the wilderness. He's really hungry. Let's read. Matthew 4:3 and 4. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." What Satan is doing here, he's seeking to take Jesus' serenity. What's he doing? Let's look at the next thing. Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." He's seeking to take his serenity here. What's he doing? We'll figure that out. Let's look at the last example. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him and angels came and attended him. What we have here is a real shot. Satan taking his best shot to try to take from Jesus the kind of things that will result in Jesus having a deep sense of confidence. He's gone about a month, almost and a half without eating. And it says, and he was hungry. That's probably putting it mildly. I don't understand how you can go a month. They say that's the limit of being without food. That's a stretch, but he's Jesus. But at any rate, he experiences hunger. And I guess here's my question. What's the deal with these temptations? What's wrong here? The devil comes up and says, well, if you're the Son of God, and he is, command this stone to become bread. I mean, what's wrong with that? You understand what? Is it wrong to make bread? I mean, is it okay to put bread in a microwave? You know what I mean? Is it okay to make it on the spot? What's wrong with this? And the thing about jumping off the building. God said the angels come and rescue. So I guess that's my question. What makes these temptations? They don't seem that bad. Not bad to eat, not bad to be saved. What's the big deal here? What's the temptation about? You know what I think the problem here is? I don't think it's the what. I don't think there's anything wrong with bread. I don't think there's wrong with trusting God's deliverance. I don't think the problem is in the what. You know, I think the problem is in the when. Provision. Now. I think that's the problem. Now. Protection. Now. Praise. Now. I think that's the issue. See, Jesus is living with tension. And he has to live with the tension of, wait a minute, I just went through the water and, the Spirit came down. I heard the voice, you're my beloved Son and you I'm well pleased. I'm walking around in this place now and the Spirit led me to this place. He didn't just walk there by himself. The Spirit said he led him into the wilderness. So it was God's will that he be in a place that he was hungry. And now a couple things happen. He's here and then he starts to experience tension. What would the tension be from? We can get this, can't we? The tension is my stomach is craving something and I have nothing to give it. It creates tension. It creates an awareness of need. And what Satan says, let's take care of that tension now. Make that stone become bread. I think that's the temptation in the now. Or, there's another thing that happens when you have physical needs. Not just Jesus, us too. relationship problems, social problems, physical problems. What ends up happening, that physical need triggers an emotional problem, which is what? Don't you care about me? Why aren't you doing anything? You know, you said, you're my beloved son, with you I'm well pleased. You know, I heard that, but now you're leading me into this place, and you're not feeding me, and now it's a month and a half. And what ends up happening now, it doesn't just become a stomach issue, it becomes a mind issue. And what Satan says, hey, he must be really busy. Why don't you correct this tension now? Jump off the building. Make God show Himself that He's there for you. Now. Praise. Being in the light of people's regard can be a mood-altering experience. Sometimes when we don't have our needs met physically and we feel abandoned emotionally, if we can live in the light of people's smiles, if the world can turn its gaze towards us and look up in rapt admiration, it feels, I'm forgetting about my hunger. It's mood-altering. I think that's at least part of what the third temptation is about. When it says all the glory, all the splendor, literally it's glory, I will give to you. And I think what He's promising him is, Jesus, I'm going to turn the whole world so that they are looking up at you and just waiting for your next word. The whole world. And they're going to look up at you and they're going to... Would that meet a need? Perhaps. And that will happen. But what Satan wanted to happen is now. You know what this is about? When you boil all this down, Satan is tempting Jesus to live by faith. Is he tempting Jesus to live by faith? Faith is confidence in what God says, not what I see. You know what Satan is doing? Tempting him to live by sight. Base your confidence on what you can see. Hold out. Make God show Himself. That's what this is about. Getting Jesus to try to bite on living by sight. Bring provision from God into view now so you can see it. Bring protection into view now so you can see it. Bring praise into view now so you can see it. This is a real temptation. I experience it almost every time I turn into TBN. When I'm told that I can give $1,000 and see it now. And I'd love to see it now. But that's not the truth. The truth is serenity is built on not being able to see it now. Walking through places that feel difficult. Application. Let's talk about a few things and we'll wrap up. God is not invested in removing our tension now. This stinks, but it's the truth. God is not invested in removing our tension now. When you know what the worst thing I do? The hardest thing I do in my life, I've just turned, okay, now ready. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and your part is to look absolutely astonished and dumbfounded. Okay, wait a minute. So let me see the astonished, dumbfounded look. Let me see it. There it is. Good. Okay. I just turned 55. No, let's try that again. I saw more laughs than astonishment. I didn't see sufficient. Inconceivable. I can't. Okay. That's what I wanted to see, and I didn't see it. You laughed. That's the problem with being... I really like this better in a way. I can see you. And I never could see you in the auditorium for real. And I like that. But I don't like the fact that you just laughed and I could see it. Now I forget what I was trying to say. Gosh. That's stupid. Anyways, yes, they say that brain cells, they start to erode when you get over to that age. God is not invested in removing our tension now. The most difficult thing I do, see, I got it back, is dealing with me when me doesn't have what me wants. It's the most difficult thing I do, dealing with me when me doesn't have what me wants. How does that look for you? When me doesn't have what me wants, we become sullen. They don't care about me. Some of us withdraw and we back into caves. Some of us don't back into caves, we come out with claws. We come out of the caves like with bear claws. And how dare you not give me what I need? But either way, it's difficult to live with ourselves when we don't have what we want. God is not invested in removing our tension now. This is the essence of serenity. Serenity remains in the midst of conflict. Serenity is about accepting that which we could change if we could, but we cannot. And again, this really looks like a nice little statement. But when you apply it, you know that relational problem that you have? That might not be God's top agenda to remove that. And I'm sorry to tell you that. The physical problem that you have, you tune into the channel and hear that God wants you to be healed. That's not true. He will heal some of you. Some of you have lived with pain for a long time. And He might not remove the tension created by your physical hardships or your emotional hardships. And I'm kind of sorry to have to tell you that. But on the other hand, it gives us the opportunity to walk through things together and not place our hope in something. You know what they say? Resentment is unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentments. Unrealistic expectations are premeditated resentments. I think we've got to be real with things. And God is not invested in removing our tension now. And the good side of that thing is, if you're still in tension, it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. And there's a comfort to that. God's resources enable us to endure tension, not end it. And I've been seeing this more clearly. I don't like tension. I withdraw from it. If there's a fight, I go away. That's the way my house was. We didn't deal with tension openly. Everybody went to their rooms. And then we developed radar that enabled us to know when it was safe to come out. And everybody would kind of come out of there. And you have to kind of tiptoe out, and then you kind of walk out and you kind of check to make sure how people are doing, and then it kind of settles in. Some of you know exactly what I'm saying. I'm not crazy about tension. And I always thought, at some level, that if I did what God wanted me to do, He would enable me to escape tension. And you know what I'm learning? That's not the truth. God's resources do not enable me to end my tension. They enable me to endure it. And that's true for you as well. The things that God will give you, when we talk about knowing your heart and quieting your heart, we've talked about it a lot, about God saying, be still and know that I am God. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Be still and know that I am God. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. You can't say that as a mantra and expect your life to clear up. It feels good at the time. You know why God tells you that? Because you're going to need it to endure the tension that you're dealing with. You're going to have to go through it. He's not going to give you that as a magic wand to end it. And that makes me angry. I want to get rid of the tension. But that's not why His resources are there. Do you get that? As a Christian, that's for me, that's probably one of the more important things I've ever learned. I know how to quiet my heart, but I always resented it. I felt like, well, if I was doing this right, why would I be upset in the first place? And I resented having to use God's promises to quiet my heart. It happened in China. I got really irritated with myself. I felt, Mike, you're almost 50. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was much better. You learned. Why am I still dealing with this stuff? I felt like if I was doing it right, I wouldn't have this tension now. And that's what I've learned over the course of years. But God's saying, you know what? And He's saying it to you too. I don't give you promises in order to end your tension. I give you promises to endure it. Why do you want me to endure it? Because I want to teach you serenity. I want to teach you serenity. And serenity means that the tension doesn't go away, but you learn to live with it. And you learn to admit your hunger and yet not let go of your hope. Serenity exists in the midst of tension. That's what makes it valuable. It doesn't go up and down with the waves of circumstances. And again, we all got a lot to learn about this, but we have to try to figure out. See, that's why serenity can't be serenity now. Because serenity doesn't come now. It's built over time. Running away from tension is running away from serenity. Would you agree with me? Those of you who understand recovery and addiction well, running away from tension, would you not see that at the base of addiction? Would you agree? Some heads? Yeah, I can see. Isn't that what it's about? I'm upset about my life, so what do? I run to a mood-altering experience. When I get a couple down me, I don't deal with the tension as much. I forget it. Or when I go shopping, or eating, or it could be a number of things that we become addicted to. When I put another 10 grand in the retirement account, running away from tension is running away from serenity. And our nation, we're great at it because we have the ability to run away from tension. And I'm not saying that this, have a vacation this weekend. You know what I mean? But long term, you're not going to be able to run away from your tension. And well, yeah, you can. You can. Okay. You're taking a trip. You're driving away from tension. 80 miles an hour. Look in your rearview mirror. You know what that thing is that's getting smaller and smaller? What is it? Serenity. That's what it is. You're driving away from it. Saying, I'm driving toward, no, that's not serenity. Serenity is the thing you're leaving back there. Running away from tension is running away from God. You say, oh, come on. Look what it says. And this will be the verse and then we'll pray. Worship team, come on up. Look at that verse in James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. To run away from tension, to run away from conflict, is to run away from the thing that God calls you into in order to teach you to be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Serenity makers, trials, time, trust. Serenity takers, when we're led to demand provision now, protection now, praise now. And what's the solution for this? Lean into connection. We'll sing a song. The reason why you bring God's thoughts to mind, be still and know that I am God, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. As you focus on that, you're huddled against the source of security. Your hunger remains, but you don't feel so frightened. Prayer. Father, thank you for telling us the truth, for your desire to build within us serenity, which is a deep well, one that we draw from in the midst of turbulent circumstances, something that provides a core of solidity even in the midst of hunger. I'm really glad that we don't have to pretend about stuff like that we can admit that we're in a hard time. We can admit that we're hungry, and not that it just was yesterday, but that it's been going on for a while, and that's okay. Would you teach us to hold on to that really and hold on to the hope that you provide for us? Because the fact is, you do want us to experience connection with you, and that is the secret of serenity. And I guess I'd ask then, as we move through life, help us not to pretend to look at things as they are, but not to gaze at them. Help us to glance at those things that are real, but not gaze at them. I pray you help us adjust our gaze and glance. We glance at those things, but we gaze at you. we glance at that, we gaze at you and your promises, and that we don't forget what we deal with, but connected with you. Your promises help us. Be with those as we kind of go through sadness today. Divine connection that's lost. Thanks that your connection with us as we place our faith in you is never lost. It will last eternally. Pray that will give us strength as we walk through these days. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a nice couple days off. See you next week.